welcome back to the Body Pod. Today I am in person with the Dr. Darren Candow here at the Hotel Del Coronado where he is speaking. So we are thrilled to have him. We have so many creatine questions. As you know, I've already done an intro, you know of him, but he is the world researcher for creatine, and everything that we know as trainers comes from Dr. Candow. So Darren, are you ready?
I'm ready.
We're going to rapid fire.
Thank you.
We are going to rapid fire these questions. So, for women that are breast cancer survivors, is there any documentation on whether creatine is safe for them to use?
It's interesting that there's a lot of debate over cancer, but regarding breast cancer, there's just hardly any research to suggest if it's detrimental or safe from an efficacy standpoint. So obviously medical clearance is going to be one of the most important things to consider. There's probably no reason they can't because creatine is naturally produced in the body, but anybody that's suffering from any cancer or related, please talk to your medical practitioner. But the current body of evidence suggests that there's no reason they can't take it.
Okay, perfect. And for most women over the age of 35, everyone should be taking creatine.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Remember, we don't need creatine because we're synthesizing it, but to get the muscle, bone, and potential brain benefits, there is evidence that you probably need more than what we're naturally synthesizing or consuming in the diet. So, for example, if you're a vegan, vegetarian, or emphasizing a plant-based diet, you're not getting any dietary creatine, and we only produce about 1 to 2 grams a day. For bone benefits, for example, you need about 8 grams a day, so that's why supplementation might be required. And when we say creatine, we're only referring to monohydrate.
Okay. Now, this is a question that I get asked all the time too. So we have creatine monohydrate, and then we have other creatine products that might be mixed with other things.
Right.
So we want to go for the pure creatine monohydrate. But then women they're asking, is that creatine monohydrate Creapure, or is Creapure just one of the companies that produces creatine monohydrate?
Yeah, that's correct. So Creapure is a form of creatine monohydrate. It's probably the best in the world. It's third-party tested. It's originated in Germany. But any creatine monohydrate, if it's third-party tested on the label, 100% pure would be just as fine. But Creapure seems to be the world's leading type of monohydrate.
Okay, so do you, and I know we don't have a lot of studies on this, but like I love the Create gummies, and I know that you have too, and the sour apple, I just barely got that. I'm like, these are good.
Yes.
And I'm not going to get stopped at airport security, so they're great. Right. But we don't have enough studies. Is that creatine monohydrate?
Yeah, so in the labels, actually, there's many companies that'll list Creapure on it. So it is creatine monohydrate in the gummy. There's been some third-party testing coming out and saying, yeah, if it says 1 to 1.5 grams per gummy, it's what's getting in the bloodstream. But you're right, there's never been a study to actually show or compare the gummy versus the powder versus anything else. Those are coming, I'm sure. But there's no reason to suspect that creatine in solid form is not a viable source. So it's another way, active delivery, traveling. They taste extremely good. There's a lot of companies out there now, but I do know a few that have Creapure listed on. And again, that's the most popular and trusted type of creatine monohydrate.
Okay. So are there any side effects outside of, say, someone that has, conditions that we're not covering for the general public and the majority of women that I'm working with? A lot of women will complain that maybe like bloating, constipation, insomnia. Are these things that are common or that can be found by taking this supplement?
They're typically found, they're very rare, but found when you do the creatine loading phase, which is about 20 grams a day for 7 days. We don't recommend that unless you're an elite athlete. You can take as little as 3 grams a day starting out, divide that up into 2 1.5 gram dosages, maybe take it in the morning and the evening, work your way up to maybe 5 or more. We find if you take it with food, it causes less bloating, but taking a very, very small dose spread out by maybe 6 hours is very, very viable. That'll probably lead less water retention and or GI tract. So for anybody listening, if you have tried creatine or you're thinking of trying it and you do notice some adverse effects, just spread out the dose, take a little bit less, and that eventually over time, it's not like caffeine, it needs to accumulate. But I think a smaller, more frequent dosage is a strategy. But I would not recommend the loading phase.
Okay, perfect. And you can take this. It doesn't have to be pre-workout, post-workout. It could be if somebody had it in their water bottle, they could be sipping it all day, and it's not like protein where we want to get a good hit at one time?
Yeah, the smallest dose is probably you want to have higher than 1 gram. There's been studies that show maybe 1 gram doesn't get in the bloodstream, but if you want to, 1.5 or a little bit more, that will accumulate in the blood and then eventually get into the demanding tissues. The timing is irrelevant, but if you can take it post-exercise, that seems to be a very viable time because exercise will stimulate blood flow kinetics and transporters that allow creatine into your muscle. So I think taking creatine either through red meat or seafood post-exercise, i.e. a meal, or through supplementation is a very viable source. So I personally put 5 grams in my breakfast. I usually have Greek yogurt and whey protein and berries. And then I'll drink, as you mentioned, 5 grams during my Peloton or weight training session. That's 10 grams. I take 10 just for the whole body perspective.
Yes.
But for those that are just interested, start with about 3 grams, and then it'll eventually accumulate over time.
Okay, so for the minimum dose of muscle and, recovery benefits, 3 to 5 grams. But that is not enough to cross the blood-brain barrier and get all of the other effects that we are now finding that creatine helps with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you're right, from a skeletal muscle, your bicep, tricep, things like that, 3 to 5 grams is very viable. From a bone, we see that the lowest dose is about 8 grams. And then to your point, the brain, you either need to do the loading phase, which we just talked about, potentially some adverse effects, or maybe that 3 to 5 grams, but you'd have to do it for months and months on end. Again, the blood-brain barrier is resistant to creatine in circulation. Our brain will make its own creatine. So over time, it can accumulate, but it's very slow. So it really comes down to why the person's taking it. I would hope with all the evidence-based research, people are taking creatine for muscle, bone, and brain.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, rest assured, if you start with 3 grams and work your way up to 5 or a little bit more, eventually that's going to accumulate in the other tissues. And if you're taking it for the lifelong health benefits, that's very beneficial. There's a thought, do I need to cycle it? There's never been a study to show you do or you don't. So you can take it every day. We've given postmenopausal females about 11 grams a day for 2 straight years, and there's been no adverse effects. So rest assured the safety profile of creatine monohydrate is exceptional.
Okay, so since the last time that I had you, I think we did an Instagram live. Maybe it was a podcast, but anyways, it's been about 6 months.
Okay.
What has happened in the last 6 months that you are like, this is new information that people need to know about the benefits outside of muscle?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is from the neck up. So we've changed our sort of outlook on this. So if you're a young, healthy individual, adequate sleep, exercising, creatine will probably not give you any cognitive benefits. But for those individuals sleep deprived, maybe older adults, metabolically stressed, working overnight, that's where creatine seems to come to the rescue, and it really helps to improve memory and cognitive tasks. So for example, flying to Europe, most people get jet lagged, wherever it is, that's a time where creatine can be considered. Sometimes you don't know you're going to be traveling, so maybe this is something that you at least consider on a daily basis. And that's the other thing. I would recommend now taking creatine on a daily basis. That has changed, just because it can trickle into the bone and brain on those off days, and that will help accumulate over time. So there's some emerging evidence potentially with Alzheimer's, depression, and anxiety. But when you're metabolically stressed, such as sleep deprivation, that's when creatine really comes to rescue. I'm always sleep deprived, so I've actually increased my creatine, especially when you're flying or running brands and stuff. You're not getting enough sleep and things like that. I personally find it helps decrease the fogginess. And then the big question now, what the Paris Olympics, maybe these athletes in the fourth quarter, second half of the soccer game, will they be more metabolically focused and cognitive focused? That could have some implications for gold medals, world championships. So I think the next 20 years will be focused on the neck up. I think that's really, really important. And if we can have any hope for curing like a neurophysiological disease, Alzheimer's, any dementia related, it's hugely important. And so that's where I see the area going. But that's probably the newest potential. It doesn't increase fat mass. It actually you potentially can lose fat mass. So it's from a whole body perspective now, which has been interesting now.
It's super interesting. And what you just said, I mean, I can't tell you how many courses that I run with women from all over the world. And once they start hitting this peri/post-menopause phase, nobody has great sleep. And so what you just said about the benefits of being sleep deprived, I don't know a single person, myself included, that is like killing it in the sleep department.
Yeah, the brain uses 20% of our energy. It's always metabolically active. And university students traveling, working out early in the morning, you're totally fatigued. That's why we rely on coffee a little bit more. But maybe creatine can maybe overcome the detriments in the brain of phosphocreatine and help maintain ATP. But the mechanism is interesting. We see it act as like almost an anti-inflammatory in the brain. So when the brain is stressed, it sort of brings it back to homeostasis. And so that's one of the theories that for anybody that's in a very stressed environment, sleep deprived, traveling, it's something to potentially consider. But again, if you're sleeping well, great food, no, you may not experience any of those benefits.
Yeah. Okay, but it doesn't potentially cause insomnia.
I don't actually know where that came from. I hear that anecdotally a lot. The only potential theory is that where creatine is actually increasing the energy status of the cells in the brain, maybe the brain doesn't need to sleep as much to recover, just like our muscle. So some people say, hey, I don't require as much sleep when I'm on creatine because maybe creatine is helping recover the brain quicker. But the jury is still out on that. I hear some people say they sleep like a baby. Other people say they didn't need as much sleep. So we need to do a lot more cellular data on that. But I can see the mechanisms. Maybe creatine is helping the brain recover faster, just like it does to our muscle. Maybe the brain doesn't need to sleep as long to have those efficacious effects.
Okay, so let's move on to like teenagers.
Okay.
So, again, most of the women that are asking these questions and that are starting to take creatine and really get on board with that being the supplement of choice, they also have teenagers.
Yes.
And I feel like the TikTok generation, the kids are working out, they're into protein, they're into all of these health benefits. Is it safe? And, is it something that you would be like, oh, I would recommend that to all teenagers
Yeah.
without implications?
Well, again, the teenager, the child is synthesizing creatine in their liver and brain. And a great study out of Brazil a few years ago, very elegant design, simply showed children when they're taking even a higher dose, it gets in the muscle. So first, it is effective in the muscle, and good researchers here in the U.S. have now clearly shown that children, playing sports or not, have a lot of health and sport benefits, and they're actually measuring blood biomarkers now to look at adverse effects. I'd be very surprised if there's any adverse effect at recommended dosages. So anybody on the planet can benefit potentially or at least consume creatine. There should be no adverse effects because, again, we're naturally producing it. And if we don't like it, we simply excrete it in creatinine down the urine. So it's just something that comes in our body. We recognize if it was a drug, that would be a little bit different.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so really, if we were to sum this up, exercise, strength training in particular for women, high protein diets,
Yes.
and any supplement, because I'm very protective of my females because it is the cash cow of the fitness industry,
Right.
and everyone is selling them something for fat loss, for menopause, for this, for that. But it is the only supplement that I would recommend, or that the people that I run courses with, Tony, Stacy, that we recommend, that is like solid, that is not like a gimmick, that there's so many benefits that really everyone should be adding this to their
I agree
routine.
because it's naturally in red meat and seafood, so it's a natural product. It's not being always made in a commercial manufacturer. And there's only about a handful of supplements that actually been shown to be effective, like beta-alanine, beetroot juice, creatine, and caffeine are there. So I totally agree. Resistance training and cardio, that's the foundation of the cake. The nice icing on top is protein, and the sprinkles on top will be creatine. You're not going to get huge benefits from creatine. The most efficacy from creatine is muscle strength. But again, there's no downfall. Why wouldn't you consider it? So if you don't have supplementation and you're traveling and you do consume red meat or seafood, have a meal of that. You'll get 3 to 5 grams.
Yeah.
When you're on vacation, exercise will help maintain those levels. And then if you do consider supplementation, you don't need a lot. Start with a little half a teaspoon or a few of those gummies, 3 to 5 grams, and then maybe work your way up. So it's something that can potentially have a lot of upside, and there's not really any downside. Even individuals with pre-existing kidney or liver abnormalities, when they get medical clearance, can still take creatine. So really hard-pressed to find anybody on the planet at a safe, effective dose that actually can't at least consider it. And again, since you're naturally synthesizing it, that's why our body recognizes, and the safety profile is exceptional.
Okay, perfect. And I know we had this conversation before, but people will go get their blood work done. Their creatinine is high. I spent an insane amount of money because on my medical report that I had last year, about a year ago, it showed that I had stage 3 kidney disease.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I knew, and so I was like, well, I told my doctor, and I just don't think that a lot of physicians know about all of this. And so he was like, well, I was like, I take creatine, I'm going to stop for a month, and then we're going to retest. But in the meantime, I was freaked. So I went and had all these tests done that nothing was covered by insurance. Sure enough, when we redid the blood work, it was like, oh, well, you're fine now.
Yes.
So you stop taking it, and then everything comes back.
And that happens time and time again. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, but obviously, anytime you're having issues, but you're right, creatine gets taken into the muscle, but when it's broken down, it's in a metabolic byproduct called creatinine. And people are like, oh, on my requisition form, there it is, GFR and creatinine. And it's usually what happens is when you take creatine for long periods of time, creatinine may go up, and therefore when you go to your nephrologist or GP, when they measure your estimated filtration rate, if creatinine is high, they're like, whoa, that means your kidneys are not filtering it. It's like a Brita to a water filter. So make sure you tell your doctor that you're on creatine. Hopefully they remember the pathophysiology. They've all taken it through medical school. And then typically what happens is when you stop the supplementation, when you come back, your filtration rate is totally fine. So then you knew it was the supplement. Again, not a medical doctor. Please get medical advice. But usually this happens time and time again. So it leads to something called a false positive. And it can cause a lot of worry. So I think if you're taking creatine supplementation, please know it's typical that your creatinine and eGFR, which is estimated glomerular filtration rate, will go up. And just don't get alarmed until you understand the pathophysiology behind it.
Okay. So for women on like any kind of hormone replacement therapy, maybe not enough information to know if it's going to actually help or not at this point.
That's correct. The studies that we've done on postmenopausal females, they were not on hormone replacement, and they were at least 12 months since their last menstrual cycle. So looking at the effects of creatine in individuals not on hormone replacement versus, there's no studies on that, so we can only speculate, and it's hard to even make an opinion about that, because then now you're taking a drug in combination with a non-pharmacological drug and see the interactive effects. So we definitely need to see those studies. But again, I don't see any interruption or interference with the bioavailability. But again, we would have to do those studies to make a definitive conclusion.
Okay. So to sum this up, 3 to 5 grams minimum dose for the benefits of muscle.
Correct.
But for those women that maybe want the benefits of the potential, benefits of helping with Alzheimer, crossing that blood-brain barrier, what is the minimum dose there? 10 grams, 11 grams?
Yeah, it's so unknown for everybody because the variability is there. But let's just go with the 3 to 5 grams is a good base. I would speculate, and looking at the existing data, that eventually it will trickle into bone. We've never compared that dose, and the group out of Brazil showed it wasn't effective.
Yeah.
But a little bit more or longer periods of time. So let's just say if you say, I just want to take 3 to 5 grams, I'm pretty sure if you did that for months and months on end, it's eventually going to accumulate because your muscles will be full. It's either going to get excreted or go to those demanding tissues such as bone and brain. But if you're really having any neurological impairments or things like that, we just don't know the effects on Alzheimer's and dementia, and we need to do long-term studies. But it's suggesting that higher dosages is needed to get past the blood-brain barrier. So that's why I personally take 10 grams. I'm kind of speculating, doing the math, 20 grams for the brain, and I take it every day for decades. So that's where I'm at. I'll probably even increase it if I know I'm doing travels from continent to continent, or coming to conferences, whichever it is. But on a daily basis, it's nice. Now, the other good thing is once you've been taking creatine for a while, if you forget, you go traveling, it stays locked in your muscles for about 4 weeks and in the brain for about 5, as we know. So you don't need to take your creatine if you forget. Just stay active, enjoy life. It's not like a caffeine where it's cleared from the blood. It's accumulated. So, hey, you got 4 weeks for the muscle, 5 for the brain, and you can just go like that. So.
That was my next question.
Okay.
So
Tell that.
We just figured it out.
Right.
Okay, great. So really, I mean, if you're taking it and you know more than anyone, and you're not cycling it, you're not worried that like at some point in time, this is going to come back and where they're going to pull back the research and be like, whoa, creatine is terrible for you or whatever.
So to clarify that, at the high dose, there's a theory that your muscles will become saturated, and then you're desensitizing the uptake.
Yeah.
So I think if you're just taking it from a muscle perspective, you don't need the 10 grams. 3 to 5 is plenty, like more than plenty for anybody. But if you're starting to consider maybe some of that's going to trickle into bone and brain, that's where you can start to play with higher dosages. There's no downfall. We've shown it completely safe for the liver and kidney for up to 2 years at 11 grams a day. So again, it's really what's viable for you, but to maintain consistency. So the nice thing is, take it just like working out. And as you mentioned, all the benefits come primarily in combination with exercise.
Yes.
So exercise, you can still get some small benefits without, you're still maintaining activities of daily living. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So anything, as we wrap this up, is there anything coming out that is like super intriguing for you that you're like, I can't wait for the study that is kind of on the rise?
Yeah, the one thing that creatine has never been shown is to increase the rates of protein synthesis, like a protein. But there's studies in the works, and then the other big thing is now to look at different populations, maybe osteoporosis, the perimenopausal, premenopausal. We don't know in the females on bone health. So we're starting to look at children now and looking at those epidemiological studies. So creatine has had a resurgence of popularity. It'll probably be popular for another 20 to 30 years. Of that, the neck up for sure, depression, anxiety, PTSD, concussion is going to be a global press, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. So there's lots of questions out there that I got to get back to work and start doing. Yeah.
Well, we're going to wrap this up because I was lucky enough to get him in between sessions. So thank you so much, Darren, for joining us, and we look forward to having you on again.
Great, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the Body Pod with your friends.
Until next time.